Hey guys, welcome to episode number 78 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. Today, you are going to hear a conversation I had with Reshape McDonough. She is the CEO and founder of Coaching with Clarity. Now, she's not the average coach, my people. Here's the really cool thing about Lee is for over 10 years, she was a clinical psychologist, right? So we're talking about serious, intense psychological training, right? Understanding mental health, understanding how to support people through mental health issues, and then taking that and becoming a certified coach in helping people understand how to move their lives and businesses forward. She's also the host of the Coach with Clarity podcast, and she is a #1 best-selling author on Amazon. Yeah, you got to check that out. We have a link to that in the show notes right below this video. So one of the things I really loved about this conversation, and when I talked to Lee, we were introduced by a mutual friend who said, you guys have to know each other. You have to talk. And at first I was like, okay, I'm always open to meeting anybody else. But then the second we started talking, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this woman. And I think you're going to fall in love with her too, as we talk about some issues that I don't think most coaches are talking about. Now, I really want to acknowledge Lee. Again, you're going to hear me acknowledge her a lot throughout this podcast because I think her work is phenomenal. And I, as a coach, am personally really grateful for what she's standing for inside of our industry. Because I've really had a hard time with our industry lately. And I think the work that she's doing is going to bring a lot of clarity, oddly enough, right? Clarity and joy and correction, honestly, to the industry that's really needed. What you're going to hear us talk about is smashing the white patriarchy inside coaching. I know it's not a conversation that you're going to hear, I don't think, very often by two white women in this industry. And I'm so grateful we were able to have it. And what we talk about is the fact that the coaching industry, right, was created by a white man. Okay. So there's that fact. And so all of us learned how to coach based on that method. And we learned how to sell based on that method, right? How to market that way. And just as we're dismantling white supremacy and we're all working through anti-racism, that has to happen inside the coaching industry as well. And we really talk specifics about where that's happening, where that damage is, how that hurts our clients and customers, and how you as a client or customer or coach could work through that as well to bring the best of you to this industry and the best of you to your clients and customers so they can then bring the best of themselves to their own lives, businesses, and challenges, which is really why we all got into this industry in the first place. At least I promise from my heart to yours, that's why I do this, is I want you to break through things that are holding you back. And I want you to understand where your beliefs come from and where your thoughts come from. And it's not magical thinking and you just change one thing and it's all going to disappear. But part of the beliefs that we hold are created by the white patriarchy. And we need to start talking about that if we're going to actually make substantial, long-lasting change. And I promise you, I'll probably be imperfect as I do this. And Lee and I talked about that and shared that together. So I hope you enjoy that inside this podcast. But I also hope, even if you're not a coach, that as you listen to this podcast episode, that you pull towards you where you might be seeing this in your own business, in your own industry. What have you just not questioned? Right? Because that's the way it is. That's the way things are done. I think that this year is really an opportunity for us to crack that open and start to question it. And you'll hear both of us talking about how we're doing that in our businesses right now and what we can promise you in the future. And hopefully what you can promise your customers, clients, loved ones, family, everyone you work with and love as well. All right. So without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast. I'm so happy you're here today.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I think we're about to have a really good time.
I think so too.
I was looking at what we want to talk about. And when we had spoken before, and we were like, oh my gosh, look at all the fun things we could talk about on the podcast. We were like trying to whittle it down and it was near impossible because there were so many things. But I just have to say, I find your approach to the coaching industry so exciting and so refreshing. And I know I personally have been watching the industry and I'm just like, what in the actual world is happening here? And I just really want to acknowledge you for the voice that you've had inside of this and for how you've been educating people and teaching people about what coaching actually is and what we can expect from the industry and what we could and should maybe expect from the industry. So thank you for doing that.
Wow. Well, thank you for that lovely compliment. It means a lot to me. And I feel really passionate about coach training and education and what it can look like, what it does look like, how we can move forward together. So I'm excited to dive into it today.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So to start it off though, can you talk to us about your sort of evolution into the coaching industry, where you started and how this happened?
Sure. Before I became a coach, I was and still am a licensed clinical social worker. So my first career was as a psychotherapist and as a public health professional. So I really came from the world of healthcare and then mental health care, and was very happy doing that for over 10 years, almost 15 years. When my husband got out of the Air Force in 2015 and we settled in North Carolina, we were facing a huge transition. We had just spent 4 years living in Germany where we were stationed. My children had essentially grown up there. My youngest had very few memories of the United States.
Wow.
So I took some time off to help with that transition. And after about 9 months, I started getting that itch to return to some form of professional work. And I knew that it didn't look like mental health.
Mm,
I was so grateful for my time there, but I also just kind of felt this inner draw to something different. And I didn't know what that looked like until I kind of turned and towards my husband, who had bought a dental practice. He's a periodontist, and he had
okay.
been spending the last year trying to figure out, okay, I'm a really good clinician, but I've never owned a business before. How do I run a business? How do I
Mm,
manage
mm,
staff? How do I do all of that? And so to be side by side with him as he was experiencing this unique tension of being an expert in one area and a novice in another, I started seeing like the mindset issues that I had observed in a lot of my therapy clients, but just not in a diagnostic way. And I kept thinking to
interesting.
myself, there's got to be someone out there who can support people like him. And as I started doing my research, that's what led me to coaching. And I was like this aha moment and was like, I can be doing this too. This is my next step. So I did not coach my husband, just to be clear.
Word to the wise, word to the wise. Don't coach your own husband. Yes, very good.
Yeah, boundaries are good. Boundaries are a good idea always. But he really was my initial inspiration for researching the profession. I ultimately decided to complete a coach training program. I started my business. I did a lot of business coaching with other therapists. And interestingly, the more therapists I worked with, the more of them became interested in coaching and wanted support around moving into the industry. That's really what led me to turn more towards training and education for coaches. And that's what I do now.
What do you think it was? Okay, first of all, that's so cool. Sorry, I get so excited. I jump right into questions. I'm sorry about that. I just love these
No, I do that
conversations so
too.
much. So awesome story. First of all, I think what your husband experiences is what so many people who have interests or passions experience, right? They are really good at something and they just want to do that thing and turn it into a business. And then there's like, oh my gosh, running a business, right? That
Yes.
whole side to it of like taxes, staffing, mentoring, hiring the right people, firing the right people, like all those things that come with it. And it's like deer in the headlights. Like, I just want to operate on the gums. Like, I don't know all this other, and it's so complicated for people. So I love that story because I feel like it really highlights what a lot of entrepreneurs run into of like, I just want to do this one thing. So I love that story. And I think it's so cool that you were there to help him. And right out of the gate, I have this really interesting question. Like, what do you think it is? So there you were working in mental health and you're like, oh my gosh, coaching. And then you saw this happen to other therapists too. What do you think is so appealing about coaching or so open about coaching that has people want to move from one to the other or at least dip their toes in it? What do you think that element is?
I think generally speaking, the coaching profession offers a great deal of flexibility and freedom in how we serve our clients,
Hmm.
when we serve, where we serve, what we can dive in. Because it is a self-regulated industry, we're able to really run with our strengths and our passions. And at least my experience as a psychotherapist, there were a lot of limitations on my practice. Now,
Hmm.
most of those limitations were there to serve and protect the clients. You know,
Right.
there's a reason that we have HIPAA laws that protect patient health information. And so I don't object to those types of limitations at all. But some of the limitations were actually being set by insurance companies, where I felt like my diagnostic process and my treatment planning was dictated by what insurance would cover. And it wasn't always necessarily what the client needed. And I know a lot of therapists and healthcare providers generally feel hamstrung, and they are frustrated by these limitations that don't necessarily serve patient safety or patient well-being. And it leads to frustration, it leads to burnout, and it leads to searching for a different way. Now, I don't mean to suggest that coaching is a replacement for mental health care, because it's not.
It's not.
And there are very clear boundaries between what belongs in the world of therapy and what belongs in the world of coaching. And I believe that therapists in particular are very well suited to enter the coaching profession and to bring their training, their knowledge, their expertise into the profession to strengthen it. And that's why I feel passionate about really supporting anyone in their coaching journey, but especially people that have experience building relationships with clients, holding that sacred space for trust. That's what we need more of in the coaching industry.
Boy, I could not agree more. And I think, I mean, what's been breaking my heart, honestly, lately is watching that it's not so much about creating that space of trust, right? It's become about how much money I make, and look at how much money I've made, and look at how great my lifestyle is, as opposed to making room for a client or a student, right, to come through something and have their breakthroughs where they need them, have their learning experiences where they need them, and we get to be shoulder to shoulder with them while that happens. And that's actually the joy of working like this. That is the experience. And I think, you know, as I've bucked up against the industry so hard this year, is it, I really did. I explained it to my coach, right? As like, my heart is broken because I care about this so much. And I feel like it is just being bastardized every which way I turn. And I think the way that you just described the transition for therapists, and understanding that obviously you don't go into therapy for the money or because you want to show everybody your private jet, right? You go into therapy because you're like, I understand these journeys. I understand, you know, cognitive thinking and how I can help somebody understand their own behavior better. And so to have that be the motivation, you could see how that steps into the coaching industry in a really healthy way. I hadn't thought of it like that. I'm really glad you shared that with us.
Well, thank you. And I think to your point too, what I'm seeing is this kind of lifestyle industry emerging around coaching, where we're not centering the client, we're centering the coach and that lifestyle. And that to me is dangerous. Certainly in coaching, you can make a good living. I want you to make a good living.
Right. Right.
But we don't do that at the expense of our client, whether it's in session with them or whether it's in the process of bringing them on as a client or just marketing in general. I think when we center the client at every step of the way, that's where we can ensure ethical practice and to know that we're really honoring our own integrity.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Here. I like want to stand up and yell and scream, but my microphone will fall off, so I'm not going to. But I love that so much. I think that's wonderful. And I think too, as we start to kind of stand for this, like this movement inside the coaching industry, at least that's the way I'm viewing it, is there's this internal movement to be like, what is happening? What do you think about how coaches are currently educated and certified, and the fact that our industry isn't regulated? Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a thing. Like, anyone can call themselves a coach. There's no regulation around that at all. How do we deal with that? And how do we educate coaches or people who want to become coaches? What do you think the best thing to do is? And I know you have a lot to say about this one. I'm excited to hear what you say.
Oh my gosh. I have so many thoughts on this one. You know, there's a reason that I talk about the coaching industry being self-regulated. And I know that some people refer to it as unregulated. And I think that is a little unfair, because there are organizations like the International Coaching Federation, like the Center for Credentialing and Education, like the International Association of Coaching. There are organizations out there that have standards of practice, that have core competencies for coaches to follow, that have a code of ethics that we can use to guide our behavior. So there are structures out there that can provide support and oversight, but we as coaches have to opt in to that. So we have to make the choice, to say, yes, I'm going to follow this. And so that's why I think it's a self-regulated industry, and the onus really is on the coach, on the self, to say, yes, I believe in this, and I take my practice and my profession seriously, and I want to adhere to these standards. Now, one way to do that is to pursue certification. I am really clear, though, that that's not the only way, and it may not be the best way for everyone, because I also don't want to suggest that certification and training trumps experience and expertise. I think in a perfect world, we see an overlap between the two.
Right.
I think having coach-specific education is critical for every coach out there. But that may look like a full-on certification program that leads to an ICF credential. It may look like working with a mentor coach. It may look like pursuing continuing education. It may look like creating your own course of study. My hope is that coaches will choose a path and follow it, and to really be thoughtful about which path is going to best serve their own growth as a coach, and also ultimately serve their clients as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't thought of it quite as self-regulated, though I know I like got that, you know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, I guess it is. That's right. That's right. But I don't think of it that way. So structuring it that way and keeping the onus on us to be as open with ourselves as we would want our clients to be with themselves, right? Like, okay, if you're going to go do this thing, or you're going to transform this part of your life, you've got to be open to where you have blind spots and where things maybe aren't working the way that they could or should. How do you examine that, and where do you go from here? So when you say a coach should have a path, what are the most common paths you see, or what have you seen as you've been training and educating coaches yourself? What have you seen to be really successful for people, or to support different personality types maybe, or people who've come from different backgrounds? What kind of paths do you see being really helpful for people who want to be coaches?
Yes. I would say first and foremost, the path of certification is one option. And I want to actually break down what I mean when I talk about certification. And the word I probably should be using is credentialing. So when we're looking at an organization like the International Coaching Federation, who issues credentials to their coaches, and essentially that credential verifies you've been through a training program, you've received mentor coaching, you have experience, you've taken a written exam, you've taken an oral exam, like we've really investigated your abilities as a coach. And we are confident that you can go out there and serve the public. And based on your level of credential, so whether you're an associate, a professional, or a master, that signifies how much training, how much education you've had. So in many ways, it's not a fail-safe. I mean, just as in the therapy community, I knew some licensed therapists who really should not have been practicing. Yes, there are credentialed coaches out there that probably shouldn't be practicing either, but it does offer an additional sign that this is someone who has invested in their own training and education, that they have experience, and that they've agreed to follow the standards set by an organization like ICF. So pursuing a credential is certainly one path, and I think offers a great deal of knowledge to the coach, and also reassures the client this is someone who knows what they're theoretically knows what they're doing.
I think it also sends a message to the coach itself, right? That you're taking this seriously, right? Like you've invested in making sure this is actually what you want to do, to learn how to do it well, and to have other people sort of support you in doing it and watching you do it to give you feedback. But I think it has, for me, it feels like it has that gravitas. Like you're taking it a little bit more seriously than just like, hey, I saw some cute pictures on Instagram of coaches and I think I'm going to be a coach, right? Is that
exactly? Or, hey, I think so. I think so, because that's the other thing about certifications out there, is that anyone can offer a certification.
Right.
I mean, you can go on a very popular course platform website and spend $17 and get a certificate in coaching.
Right.
And call yourself a certified coach. And so again, that oversight really has to come from the self. And we want to be really clear about, what are we marketing to our audiences? How are we representing ourselves? Are we equating a $17 coaching certificate with a 125-hour training program?
Right.
And that's also something for clients to investigate too. Clients need to be asking questions. They need to be, reviewing their potential coaches' background and training and education, because right now, the way the industry is set up, it really is buyer beware. So in addition to yeah. So in addition to educating coaches, I think we also can be educating consumers too, so that they know what to look for.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think the length of time someone's been doing it too, right? I feel like that's another thing people don't always look at, like, oh, I did this 20 minutes ago. I slapped up a website and now I'm ready to go, and not actually taking the time to, what is that development like? How many people have you worked with? How does that extend? And I think what you're saying about the certification and education is part of that as well, right? Because you're practicing as you're certifying, you're learning how to have these tough conversations sometimes with people to help them pop. Right. And sometimes I feel like as a coach, I don't know, maybe it's just me, Lee, but I go through those moments. I'm like, wow, I am up against, for me as a coach, I am up against being liked or popping this person right now. Right. Because it's not always like, she's not going to like me after this conversation. That's like a potential thing. And so as a human being, like to actually have that struggle and to pull ourselves through that, I personally feel like that takes practice, to put our own humanity, our own needs, right? Like, please like me, please like, to put that last when you're actually serving somebody else and trying to help them see something they literally cannot see at the moment.
Yes, you're exactly right. It takes practice. And I think it also takes a level of supervision, which is why mentor coaching is a component of the credentialing process, so that I'm a registered ICF mentor coach. And when I work with my mentees, they coach me. I am the client. And then I provide feedback on the process. It is really cool. And it's a great way to see them in action and to highlight what they're doing well, and also provide feedback on some areas where maybe we could develop this process a little more. So, and to be clear, while mentor coaching is a part of the credentialing process, you can also seek mentor coaching at any point in your career, regardless of whether or not you're credentialed, because I think we all benefit from having that level of supervision and consultation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is so cool. So now my mind's racing. I'm thinking of all the people we can do. We can do coaching sessions. That would be so much fun. I mean, because I feel like the insights that come from conversations, obviously as a coach, I believe the insights come from conversations, right? But to have those conversations with the intent of training like that, I think is just so powerful. I think it's so, I'm just so grateful you're out there doing this, where I was so happy. And now we get to talk about my favorite thing right now. I'm going to say something maybe that might sound aggressive to some people, but how about smashing the white patriarchy inside the coaching industry? Can we talk about
that?
Because I'm really excited about it. I have to say, I'm like, yes, please, let's do some more of that. But when you and I were talking before we decided to do this podcast together, we were talking about all the fun things we could talk about. This topic came up, I want to say, really quickly. Do you remember that? We were both like, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we were like on fire.
I know. I was like, yes, please. Can we record right now? So what do you see as part of maybe the old patriarchal structures inside of coaching that are being broken up now? What do you see?
Yes. Oh my gosh, where do we begin?
I know, but really, I'd love to know, because I feel like, Lee, you have a really cool perspective. I mean, one, I do so honor and respect your background as a therapist, because of that training. I know how rigorous that is. I know what that takes. And then there's the understanding of the human psyche behind that, right? So you have all that experience coming in, plus how you train coaches, and then watching all these social change movements happen. I think you have a really unique perspective. So that's why I put you on the spot, just so you know the background.
No, thank you. And I'm happy to talk about this. And I think kind of mentally, I was differentiating between the practice of coaching and the business of coaching. And I think we can explore how white patriarchy shows up in both. Because when it comes to the practice of coaching, we really need to be taking an analytical view to the skills, the tools, and approaches we use. And coaching certainly has its roots in psychology, in organizational development, in human resources, in management theory. Coaching really draws from a lot of different backgrounds.
Theories and
exactly. And I've had to do my own unlearning as well, both thinking about my therapy background and my coaching background, because so much of what we've adopted is rooted in white-centered theory. Even, when we think about something like cognitive behavioral practice, when we think about, the fathers of cognitive therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, I mean, the fact that we call them the fathers of it says right there, we're looking at largely white men who studied other white men to come up with these theories. And so we need to be asking ourselves, is this appropriate to be using as like the preeminent evidence-based way to engage with people? Because it may not be appropriate to use with Black people, with people of color, with women, because all of the research that was done was largely done by white men in white institutions with white subjects.
Holy cannoli. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then that's all of the theory, right? That is all of the practice. That's all of the methods. All of it was structured on top of that. And I think as white people, right, really understanding, I felt like last year, all through 2020, it was like everything, the unlearning you're talking about, I felt like it was a constant rewiring of my own brain is how I felt all throughout last year. Like, wait, that's not real. Oh my God, that's not real. Oh my God, that's just flat out a lie. Like just going through, and it was like all the things that, when we talk about how we've just accepted the world the way that it is or was, right? And that just kept going. And I never thought about that as well inside therapy, that it was born out of the same, I'm going to say whitewashing, but the same like white patriarchal background that we were all taught, or I will speak for myself, that I was taught growing up as a white person in the United States. So this now dealing with this inside this industry, it's really interesting. Have you seen that change on the therapy side? Some of the research, some of the I don't want to say experiments, but some of the, like all of the background information that's been pulled in. Have you seen that started to change a little bit or not yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think it is changing. I think we have a long way to go, but I do think we are doing a better job of highlighting how the lived experiences that Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color have on, of course, their mental health, and then how we work with them. And I'm seeing it in the coaching industry a little bit too, in terms of pushback against mindset work. And I want to be clear that I love mindset work. I wrote a book about mindset work. Like I believe that mindset work is an important piece of the coaching puzzle. But the thing is, what's happened is because mindset work so often has its roots in a cognitive behavioral approach, it's so easy to say, all you have to do is change your thoughts and then you're going to change your results. Yeah. Just change how you think about things and you're going to see changes externally. What that does, though, is it negates the fact that there are very real external obstacles at play for a huge portion of the world. To tell a Black woman, you need to just change the way you think about how you're being treated by your white boss, for example, is so belittling, and it completely erases her lived experience. So that's what I'm seeing, certainly, yes, in the therapy world, also in the coaching world, is taking a critical analytical view to mindset work and asking, okay, it doesn't have to be either or. It's not just change your thoughts. It's also, we can do that while also questioning the racist structures that are currently in place that are creating these limitations for people, and how we can take their lived experience into account as well.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to take what you said a little bit further, because it is belittling when we do that. And I've heard it too. I mean, and I talk about it as well. Listen, I'm a coach, right? We can't not talk about mindset because it does play a role. And I always talk about beliefs as well, and the hidden beliefs we have, right? Like it's going to stay this way. Those things that I do think as a white person, there's no way I can understand certain experiences. And not only is it belittling, I'm going to use the word, it can be a little bit vicious. And it's vicious with a smile. You know what I mean? And that, I think, is something inside the coaching industry I'm definitely out to change. Is like, can you just pay a little bit of attention to where that lands? Can you just hang on for a second and like actually think about the fact that you may not know everything that's happening here? And while hidden beliefs are important and mindset work is absolutely important, we need to understand where those beliefs came from, why the mindset's that way, and maybe understand there might be more than just oh, it's a rough day at play. It's like,
Exactly.
we need to look at like actually the structures that are in place to keep it exactly the way it is. And then for us not to be allowed to talk about it.
Yes.
Right. On top of
That's
that.
exactly
Yeah.
right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And we need to be asking the question, who benefits from
Yes.
this?
Yes.
Who benefits from these internalized, often unconscious beliefs that we all hold because we've all grown up in this, with, I think it's Ibram X. Kendi who talks about like white supremacy and racism is in the air we breathe. It's baked in to what we do. So much of this is unconscious. It is internalized. And who benefits from that? Well, it's the people who are in power who want to stay in power.
Yes.
So by calling it out, by analyzing it, by bringing a really thoughtful critique to it, and then looking for different ways, that's how we dismantle white patriarchy in coaching.
I love that. How can we do that on the business end as well? So we said there's kind of two ways we're looking at the patriarchy, right? That two ways that we're seeing this sort of crumbling of a structure that's been in place, right? That at least that's how I'm viewing it, is watching this going, why is that set up that way? Why is that set up that way? Like that kinds of question. So that's in the internal piece of it. What about on the business end of it? What are you seeing on that side of it that you think maybe we can talk about to sort of start to break that up a little bit too?
Yeah, I think whenever we're talking about white patriarchy and white supremacy, we're looking at power and we're looking at how people stay in power. So then we need to look at the power dynamics in our marketing practices as well. And I think what we see a lot of in the coaching industry, and we talked about this a little before, is this idea of here's this idealized lifestyle that you should want to have. And in order to get that lifestyle, you need to buy my product. And by the way, it's only available for a limited time and there's only so much. And so we manufacture scarcity in order to really bully people into taking action, maybe before they're ready or before they've thought it through. So for me, I think really looking at some of the scarcity tactics that we use in marketing, and exploring how that's connected to power and power dynamics, that's also at the heart of dismantling white patriarchy in the coaching industry.
I just want to hear you talk about that all day. I really do. I'm just sitting here like sighing with, yes, say more things. Yes, say more things. We recently have decided all of our programs are evergreen. I just refuse to do that ever again. I was joking around with a client. It's so strange in the coaching industry or even any of the online course space, right? People do that fake scarcity thing of, well, it's only available till Tuesday. I'm like, could you imagine if you were a house painter? And you're like, I'll paint your house until Tuesday and then never again. Like, what is this? The craziness. Yeah. And I get this. Look, people do it because it works, right? Yes. So I think there's also the conversation, Lee, that we need to have with consumers to be like, hey, this works because you're choosing not to take steps forward unless someone shoves you. Right? Yes. So there's like those two things. And also to have almost like, it's like that education-based marketing, right? Where it's almost like we want to teach people like, you may not be ready and that's cool, but check in to see if it's, you're not ready or if it makes you nervous, right? Those are two different things. And like, let's talk about that because that's okay to talk about. And there might be times you're absolutely not ready. And there are things you need to take care of either financially or emotionally in order to be able to hear this and implement it and do something with it. That's cool, right? But let's talk about all the times you are ready and you run away from it because that's different, right? And like, let's explore that. But I feel like it's such a disservice to the customers and students. And I mean, I guess I was going to say, I'm not sure where this got set up, but I kind of am sure where it got set up because coaching was created by a white man, right? The idea of coaching as a mental discipline, right, was created by a white man. And that's how he sold his programs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like when we look at the marketing of coaching, we're drawing in from sales psychology and persuasion. And those tools can be very powerful in the right hands, used for the right purpose. Sometimes people do need support around making a decision. Sometimes knowing it's like, look, you've been debating about this for a long time. Let's reach a decision here. Like that's a little different than trying to scare someone into taking action because they're afraid they're going to miss out.
Correct.
And the same thing too with scarcity. I mean, the fact is, if you're a coach and you do primarily one-on-one coaching, you only have the capacity to work with a certain number of clients. So in that sense, your time is a scarce resource. There's only so much available. And if you're saying, I have room for 4 clients, if you want to work with me, let's have a conversation. Well, that is what I think of as legitimate scarcity. You only have so much bandwidth and so much time. So you're not using that as a way to like rush people into action. You're providing them with accurate information so that they can make a decision. And that's really the big difference here is, again, is it serving the client? Is it helping the client in their process? Or are we trying to engender fear and anxiety in order to push them into a decision maybe before they're ready?
Love it. Yeah, it is. It goes back to education-based marketing, right? Like, let's make an educated decision here about what's happening. And sometimes it's emotional too. I say that, I teach that, right? Like everything we purchase is an emotional purchase. I can't think of anything that's not, except maybe healthcare, right? Outside of that, it's like, there's an emotional response here. I don't really need another set of earrings, right? But I think they're going to get me something that I don't have already. That's, which is bizarre, right? But we do it. And I think in looking at how we talk about our services and we talk about the truth about what's available, an online course will always be available. It's not like they disappear into the ether at a certain time. There's no online platform that erases programs by January 3rd or whatever the date is. That's fake. And I love what you said too, though, but there are timed resources that are scarce because that's the one thing we can't alter. We cannot like create more time out of thin air. And I think that is such a positive distinction you've just made for us. And I hope everybody listening who's on the fence about something, right, whether it's a coaching purchase or any other purchase, listens to that and hears the truth in the marketing, right? There's the slime in the marketing and the trickery in the marketing. And then there's the truth in the marketing. And you said one other thing that I thought was really interesting about, I kind of see marketing like a tool, and the tool is only as good as the person using it.
Yes. Which is why, again, we come back to this idea of opting in, of choosing to regulate ourselves, whether it's in the practice of coaching or whether it's in the business and the marketing of it, being really clear on what our values are, our personal values and our business values, being really clear about our ethical framework and what guides our decision-making. And that's going to help us ensure that when we are given these tools like scarcity and marketing, we understand how to use them in a way that's not going to exploit people. And I just want to say too, for the record, for anyone who's listening, this conversation we're having right now is not meant to shame anyone, because the fact of the matter is we have all fallen prey to this. I have.
Yes. Me too.
I'm in the process of reviewing all of my sales pages and all of my funnels and everything, because I have elements of this baked in because I was taught to do it. I had a coach, advise me, or I had a funnel designer do it. So I can sit here right now and tell you, I've got a countdown funnel or countdown timer on a funnel that I have, and it's not sitting well with me. And I do need to go back and revise that.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. I'm in the exact same process, Lee. We're in the exact same.
Are you?
Thank you for saying that, because I would never want anyone to feel shamed. And we got to start telling the truth. So there's like that balance there. So I really appreciate you putting that piece in, because it is important to me that nobody feels shamed. But we also got to, it's kind of like dealing with the white supremacy issue, right? Like we have been breathing it in for so long. It takes some work to pull it apart, and we don't have to feel guilty about that. And in fact, feeling guilty about it can keep it in place, because then you don't want to look at it. Right.
Exactly.
So I really want to make this an open, like, hey, let's get together as kick-ass coaches and sit down and look at like, how can we make this amazing? And questioning where these methods came from and why they work and how we can do a better job. And I just really want to just tell you how much I appreciate you saying that, because it's really, really important that everyone feels included in this conversation, because we're all going to make mistakes. And by the way, I think, Lee, 100%. I can say this for both of us, Lee, neither one of us is on a pedestal here. Like, well, I've got it figured out and it's all perfect now.
Nope.
Like, we're going to have to fight against this for a really long time, because it's the air we've been breathing too. Right. So there's a lot of investigation going on here. It's going to take some time, I think.
It is. We are not going to dismantle these systems overnight, and we're not going to uncover all of the ways they've been showing up in our business and in our lives overnight either. It's a process. It's going to take time. And I think I don't know about you, but especially when I was really kind of in the early stages of learning about all of this, I felt such a strong sense of urgency to fix it all now. And
Yes.
that urgency and that desire to fix is just as much stemmed in that white patriarchy as everything else. And we don't do anyone any favors, especially ourselves, by rushing into it without thinking it through, without analyzing, without talking to other people and talking to people who are affected by this. Like, you do not have to change it all in a day.
Mm.
But let's make sure that we are taking consistent efforts to make those changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. And I think there's a lot of nuance in it too. And I think, one of the things I love to talk about for women, especially, is self-trust. Because one of the other things we've been breathing in is you don't really know. You have to ask somebody else, preferably a man.
Yes.
Right? You got to check in on
Yes.
that because you don't really know. And so really like pulling that out and saying, no, I can trust myself to make this decision. And you know what? Sometimes a countdown clock is fantastic because your time will be involved in a certain way. And that absolutely works for your business. And it is 100% in line with everything you're trying to do to support other people in growing and transforming themselves and trusting that, right? That there isn't, I think part of the white patriarchy stuff, like you were saying about the urgency, I think the other piece is the perfectionism piece. There's only one way to do this and you have to do it this way, or it's not, and that
Yes.
what we're saying too, there's not one way to do what we're saying either. Like, let's crack that idea open and start to trust ourselves in our own practices and really looking at how can I best support my students and my life, right? So you're not working 24/7 and being crazy. Like, we don't want that either.
Yeah.
Like you said, like, let's start to really explore this together and give each other permission to figure out where that works and where it doesn't, and that there is no rush. There's no freak out, right? I
There's
love
no
that you
rush.
said that, Lee. That's so brilliant. Really, really
Oh,
appreciate
thank you.
it. Really.
Thank
'Cause,
you.
I mean, I can hear it in people, right? Like, but it's like, it's okay. But I need to make
Yes.
money. I know. Like, it's good. I know. I totally got it. I got it. It's gonna be okay. Yeah, it's a lot of unlearning.
Yes, it is. It is. So let's give ourselves some grace and some space as
Love
we
it.
do this, to ourselves and to others as well.
Yeah.
And just remember, like, it starts with being really clear on what matters most to us, what our values are,
Mm.
and then thinking about how those values become operationalized in our actions through our business, through our client work, through our relationships. And you're right, we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. There are going to be times where we're acting out of alignment and it doesn't feel good. And that's part of being human. So again, there's some ownership that has to come with it, and there's some accountability that comes with it. But let's create space for that in the process. Otherwise, you're right, we're reverting to that kind of perfectionistic, all or nothing binary way of thinking, and that doesn't serve anyone.
Right. Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, Lee, I want to like crawl through my computer and hug you right now. Like, this has been so much. These are the types of conversations, like when I started the podcast and really over the last several months as I've been examining what is happening for me internally, as I'm like, I am so uncomfortable with all this. I wanted to like wipe out my website, clean up. I was like, what is happening here? And it's been so helpful to have conversations like this where we really start to investigate what is happening. What are we listening to here? How did this happen? How is this structure serving, and who benefits from it being structured this way? So beautiful. I'm so grateful to you. And I know that you have something really cool, speaking of clarity, for our listeners. So I would love, could you share with us what that is?
Yes. So I have created a free blueprint. It's the Coach with Clarity Business Blueprint that really helps people kind of walk through the pieces of creating a sustainable business that lights you up and that serves your clients really powerfully. And I'm really working on creating a framework where, again, there's no one right path. You can develop the path that's going to work best for you and for your business. And so the blueprint can help you do that. So if you head to coachwithclarity.com/blueprint, that's where you can find it.
I love it. Thank you so much. I so appreciate what you're doing for our beautiful industry that we both love so much. I'm just so grateful. It's like that thing where you can breathe because awesome people are out there doing awesome work. You know what I mean? It's like, other people have got this. We don't all have to do it. It's like so awesome, the community that you're creating and what you're providing for all of us coaches out there. I so appreciate your work. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart, Lee. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, I received that. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for creating a platform where we can have these discussions and these conversations and know that this is just the start, that we're going to continue doing this work. We're going to continue talking about it. And I'm grateful for you and for your podcast for being a part of that.
Awesome. All right, Lee, thanks. Bye.
Bye.